Hi everybody, it's Helen from the Squiggly Careers podcast, and I have a super quick summary of this week's episode on one of my favourite topics, values. But we've taken a particularly practical look at values because we're talking about how you can talk about your values in your team. Way back at episode 42, we talked about how you can discover and understand what your values are. It is one of the 5 squiggly skills we talk about in our book, The Squiggly Career. So we think this is really, really important. But awareness only gets you so far. You've got to put this stuff into action if it's going to make a difference to your development. And talking about your values in your team is one way in which you can do that. So on the podcast episode, Sarah and I talk about the benefits of doing this. A couple of things to be aware of. First of all, this really helps you to create better bonds in teams, because if you understand what motivates me and I understand what motivates you and we work together, that's a real source of empathy and understanding between us, which can create those bonds, those points of connection. And I think in the context of what we're seeing in a lot of the research at the moment, that people are feeling a bit disconnected from their work, even burnout, for example, I think bonds and belonging can counteract people's feeling of burnout. So could be a very useful time to do these exercises that we're talking about. The other thing it can be really useful for is to spot points of commonality. So where we have common values. So for example, Sarah and me, we both have a value of achievement. It means something slightly different to us, but knowing that we both have that is quite useful when we both work together. Also, it can potentially help you to spot sources of conflict. And conflict is pretty normal because we want difference and diversity in the teams that we work with. But what we don't want is that conflict to become destructive to the work that we're doing. And so understanding, well, where have we got difference and how does that show up? And when could that work against what we're trying to achieve are all the sorts of curious questions that you can get to and conversations that can result from that when you take a values approach to exploring and understanding how we all work better together. So it just gives you that language to do that. We've got several different ideas for action. I think there are 4 different ideas for action that we share on the podcast. One of them, we talk about simple tools that you can use in team meetings where you don't even have to use the word values. You can just start to explore, what motivates you, what drives you, what's most important to you. One of them is a free tool. This is actually already on our website, so you can go and get it now in our free resources. It is the More About Me set of questions. We've done this in our team meetings. You just answer some questions about yourself, get people to do it in advance, and you create time in a team meeting for people to share. So I think this is how you get beyond the human doings that we often can fall into, and you get more into sort of the human being. And it's a nice, easy way to do that, quite a comfortable conversation for people to have. And it's, fascinating to hear people's responses. One of the other things that you can do, which is really useful, is you can get people to talk, probably in pairs is the most useful way to do this, but about a career high and a career low. But what makes this particularly effective in teams is if you make it very relevant to what's going on right now. So it's what's a high been this week and what has a low been this week. So the time frame is really specific. And what you're looking for really is sort of what can you learn from a low when someone's talking that through, and what is it that you hear when they're sharing a high? Because in their answers you collect clues, and those clues are things that might be their values, the things that motivate and drive them. Anyway, we talk about all this in a lot more depth on the podcast episode. So if you think it's going to be useful, give it a listen. We will put the links in the comments for you. And if you do listen, let us know what you think about it and if you are taking action with any of the things that we share. As ever, to help you out, we have got pod sheets that will summarize some of the tips and the tools that we share. And then just to make it easier for you to access all that stuff, you can sign up for pod mail. So every week on a Tuesday, you'll get a link to all the resources that we create and all the different ways that you can engage with it, things like Pod Plus, for example. But I hope that has been helpful. Next week, we are going to have another episode. It will be episode number 300. So yeah, that will make that a special one. And we've got a special resource coming out to celebrate that milestone too. So thank you for being part of our Squiggly Careers podcast community. And if you ever have any episode recommendations, you can always get in touch with us. We're Helen and Sarah at squigglycareers.com.